Hi everyone. Today's Monday, January the 13th, and this is the Moneyball Morning Report for the Benzinga Pro platform. My name is Anne-Marie Band. We've got our first full week of earnings on the horizon. Earnings season begins today, and so what we want to do is look at that along with the backdrop of what kind of news we have coming along. And so let's take a peek. Today on the 13th, we don't see too much, a couple of bill auctions, but we do have earnings on the horizon. So let's get back to TrendSpider and have a look. As always, first day of the week, we look at the weekly formation. I'm not going to look at the monthly today. We're just going to start with the weekly, and you can see that in the box that we've got located between 57.16 and 61.11 is where all of the pricing has been since September 16th, which gives us a little bit of an understanding about the rotation that's continuing. So what do we see? Downside momentum, upside trend relative, but the tighter time frames are showing lower highs and lower lows. So the market is really trying to find value at the base. What is my thought for the ES as we go into the daily? The levels, I suspect, today, based on momentum being down, trend being down, from a daily perspective, it tells me that the traders are going to try and first hold this 58.22, bounce into relative resistance, probably near 5,900, and then rotate back downward. You can see that we've broken this wedge that we've been building for several days. And so this does tell me that the potential to move into the volume point of control is very likely. And that volume point of control is all the way down at 55. So we could grind our way down there. There's a very big liquidity area at 57.25. Intraday formations certainly showing sell the bounce. Right? Very deep trend. Now, here's the thing. When we say sell the bounce and we've got momentum very low, it certainly is telling us that we've got a bounce on the horizon before we decide to short. Now, what's going to keep us consistently lower is that we stay underneath the VWAP. 58.40 right now support. Remember, we look at that opening candlestick to tell us what's going on. And that opening candlestick has a high of, let's see what that is, 58.67.50 and a low of 58.48. So it's a little bit over 20 points wide. And that is really going to be what we want to watch in terms of being able to recapture that line. If we recapture 58.47, we'll try to head our way back to the top of that opening range. But I do see traders trying to get a bounce here in the morning. I still think the bounces are failures, but they are setting up as a bounce. Let's take a look at the corresponding SPY. While we're here, take a look at the weekly. We can see more lower highs. You know, we are hitting the lower lows, but you can see the buyers are really trying to set up there. Bounce zone could be in progress. We have some negative momentum, but look at the Keltner bands. There's a volatility event showing up here. The top side still cresting higher. The bottom side looks like it's trying to crest lower. So we could see expanding volatility here. In my mind, deep dips still going to be buys all the way down to 564, maybe 551 with the key zone. I've got two lines here, but it could be that it's right there in the middle at 569. In terms of general motion. We go to the daily chart, we can see it's trending downward, we can see it's broken the wedge, we can see the lower highs, trying to hold the lows on the daily. Looks like bounce action could give us the clean short. If you want to trade in the direction of trend on the bounce, you really want to make sure that your hourly candlesticks do not press lower, and they're not, and they break higher, and it looks like they are. So pullbacks here, holding the volatility band, the VWAP, the volume point of control, and that volatility band on the Keltner, it tells us that a bounce action, reflexive bounce, is on the horizon. Friday's closing VWAP all the way up at 581. We're currently at 576. All right, let's go to the NQ. Remember, the first day of the week is always a little bit longer. If we take a look at the weekly, NQ, we can see that we've got negative momentum. We've got positive trend on the bigger time frame in terms of the wider moving average, but we are continuing to make lower lows and lower highs, right? So my suspicion is that we head down into the heavy congestion of this box. The halfback is 20,690 or so. So traders are going to try and bounce off of this range into 21,250. We could have ourselves a pretty solid reflexive buy across the board, but that buy might come in this way. Notice how it was several days back, actually a while back in July. We had these 3 weeks of downside action, but in the fourth week, it just absolutely catapulted lower, found buyers, and then turned around. If that's the case today, the catapult lower should be into the 20,000 area, and then the bounce up into the resistance zones. If for happenstance it's got more downside on the horizon, it very likely could bounce first into 21,256 and then rotate further. Set your charts looking at these edges, the markers of price that we've got that say, hey, traders likely buying if it comes into 24,490. They're going to try and find something down there. If they don't, it's going to head into the volume point of control, and that's going to be somewhere around this 20,000 level. As it sits on the daily chart, bounces are sell zones, but those bounces easily could go to 21,240 all the way up to 21,377. I expect a lot of volatility over the next few weeks. Going to the hourly chart, you can see, am I looking at someplace that I can buy a dip? Yes, if you're buying the dip. Here, it's almost up into the VWAP. Lots of support area at 20,870. I'll draw a line there for us. That's going to be the zone where we can go, all right, let's see if they can get up and over here. So let it come into the level and then break down. Don't be a hero here trying to catch the short, because it could be fairly explosive and move another 100 points into 20,974 before it rotates over. But it clearly is heading to the VWAP, clearly heading to the upside here. Old support, new resistance. Got to be very careful for that. Moving on to the YM. This is the Dow, of course. Let's go back to the weekly. The Dow's been a little bit weaker than the others. It really is testing this moving average we've been looking at everywhere else that said it's upside. The dollar, folks, is absolutely screaming to the north, and that is because of strong U.S. data and GDP information, and that's forcing the dollar upwards because it's putting the Fed against the wall to reduce rates, because we still have inflation things going on. We've got CPI coming up this week. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Here's the support floor for the YM on a weekly formation. It looks like about 41,900. That's going to be a nice bounce zone. However, look at momentum. It's very steeply down. Look at the VWAP, very steeply down. Tight hull, very steeply down. So the bounces are likely to be short-lived. Let's go to the daily chart. We can see that very clearly. Everything looks pretty negative. I'm gonna leave that one on. I am going to remove that though. We can see the downward trend, lower lows, lower highs. Buyers trying to come in at this 41,970 zone. You can see it over here on the November time frame, but Keltner channel down, down. So the daily formations are saying clearly, listen, our bounces are going to bring sellers back into the market. Where will those sellers be? Anywhere between 42,500 and 42,800, right? Up into that trend line space. Let's take a look at the hourly. Yes, they are trying to hold the bottom. You can see it, right? Failure to head lower. These guys are already above the VWAP into resistance. So remember what a chart has to do. First thing, fail to close lower. Second thing, breach near-term resistance. Third thing, pull back and give us a higher low. Now, sometimes that pullback comes on a much tighter time frame, but we do have to watch for that. This looks to me like we're setting up a reflexive bounce that could run a few hundred points easily, all the way to 42,270. And then here's a liquidity level as well as Friday's closing VWAP around 42,400 to 42,470. All right, let's take a look at, whoa, I forgot the Qs. Let's go back to the Qs. Let's look at the weekly chart on the Qs. Mentor Q says negative gamma is in play, and that's obviously going to mean dips further down. I like looking at the dollar here. The dollar is incredibly overshooting right now, but that's neither here nor there. We'll watch to see what goes on. For the Qs, we can see that we're in the half-back range between 484 and 525, right? So what is that, 40 points or so? And the halfback is really right around this 499-ish area, 500-ish area. Traders, again, trying to bounce off of that zone. You can see them. This is value area high on the daily chart, but everything's doing exactly what we think it ought to do. It's coming into formations that say, listen, on a longer time frame, I should be trying to bounce. Take a look at what's happened here. Have I stopped heading lower on the hourly chart? Yes, I have. Have I breached resistance? Yes, I have. Have I come in and held a higher low? Yes, I have. And so the next pullback event is very likely to be a buy zone, just so long as it holds that low that we're sitting right at around 500. That's the number that we're looking for. If it holds 500 on the pullback, we could easily see 504. All right, let's go to oil. And then I'll do Bitcoin. Sorry about missing the order. Here's the weekly chart. Oil in a breakout. Why? A lot of unrest. A lot of new sanctions on Russian oil, a lot of things going on. I noticed when I was driving back from a trip to St. Pete this weekend that the price of fuel had really spiked up, and I did not know what the news was, but I knew that there was news. Here we are at 78. That's really a big fat number for it to look at. If it pulls back, it's very likely to catch another bid somewhere around the 75-80 region, but it is continuing to climb, very likely 83 next line in the sand with a little bit of a stop at 80. So this is really moving, and contrary to the dollar, it's moving in the same direction as the dollar, which is not always the case. Take a look at this. We talked about this last week. I said, hey, if we're breaking an edge, what are we going to do? First of all, we're going to consolidate if the trend is strong. We're going to hold that ledge, and then we're going to break out. And we absolutely did that at the breakout above 74.30 last week. It held almost all the way to 78, pulled all the way back, but look at where it held. It held at that 76.20 area. I like that zone for a pullback here. Really, I'll be looking for a little bit of a deeper dip and then a move to the north, or an aggressive explosion up to 80. Good intraday trading formations sitting here in oil right now. See the consolidation? But it's a megaphone. We've got higher highs and lower lows, sideways action pushing us to the north. What do we see from here? If we do an old resistance, new support on a very big time frame, it pulls us all the way back to 75 if we're looking from January the 8th. If things are much stronger, we may hold 76.50. All right, and so that's really, really important. Dips or buys here in oil, they are going to continue higher. We do have a lot of thin volume here, but that happens in the pre-market. I'm looking because we've got momentum here from the Keltner bands showing upward progress. That's given us good solid trend. We are still really pretty high up on the stochastic. That's going to give me pullbacks or buy zones, and they could be a little bit shallow since they're right in line with these higher levels, and certainly the momentum readings are above zero. Okay. Let's take a look at Bitcoin, and then we'll check out gold. Bitcoin, savage rotation off that 108. Lots of folks saying, you know what, I am ringing the register. You can see that from the hull. Notice when the hull sits well above prices, you're looking for the bounce into the hull that gives you a lower high that will say to you, listen, I've got some shorting action on the horizon. And this is what is happening. Where are we headed next? I do believe the buyers are going to try and do something at this 89 area, but I still believe that these bounces are going to be sell zones. So if we have a nice tidy bounce for about 8,000 bucks, it's another short. You could say, well, Anne-Marie, why can't I go long? You absolutely can. You'll need to do it on a much tighter time frame. Right now, I believe we are headed into the 75 to 80,000 area because of the low volume node sitting here in the volume profile. There's also a gap and value area high all the way down at 75. So on the daily chart, we're seeing a lot of interested buyers that came in around this 97 to 96,000. We talked about that. And it held for a time, gave us a higher high. And now we've moved into a potential space that may be giving us a lower low. So my suspicion is bounces are sell zones unless you're taking very tight time frames, and then you might be able to buy the dip. So let's do that. Let's take a look at this formation. Has the chart told us from an hourly perspective that this is a dip zone to be bought? And that would be no. Why? Because we're still making lower lows and lower highs. We've got to stop making lower lows, or the price action is going to be a dead cat bounce and we will lose money, or it'll be catching the falling knife and we'll lose money. So watch for this momentum indicator to start to flatten out. It's really going to tell you by price, but look what happens here. When it comes into an area, when the trend is very negative, it's going to bounce into resistance and then retest an area that ultimately holds. So you've got to wait for closing action. I think if you're looking for long, you have to wait for closing action that's quite bullish above this 91,900, and then wait for a pullback that shows a higher low. So it's going to be the wait state that you have to look for in Bitcoin, but it could be a buy point heading out into the front line of resistance, a pullback into a higher low, and then you can trade it long again. Let's take a look at gold. First on the weekly, I've been mentioning that this 2,700 area, 2,700 to 2,740 is very likely resistance. That is certainly what we are seeing, especially from a weekly formation, right? Fading right now, where? 2670 to potentially 2680. Right now it's 2692. Look at the sideways action on these moving averages. Look at the Keltner band. It's flat to the upside, trending up on the downside. So it tells us buyers are underneath, right? This motion tells us buyers are underneath. Momentum says, hey, pullbacks are buy zones. So that's what you're looking for. But wait for the pullback or it's going to punch you in the face. So you really want to watch for that. My thought, ideally, it would be very nice if we came in and held this area around 2612 to 2615, and then we could take the trade long. Right now, it's sell the very top, buy the very bottom, and keep your stops tight. That's how that's going to work. I think that collapses all the way down with the same mechanical flow on the daily. You can see that here. Traders sell here. They're selling here. It came all the way back. We're looking for that higher low. So I'm thinking 2612, something like that. And if we go to the hourly chart, we're going to see clear lower highs and lower lows. We do see a buying wick here. There is liquidity sitting down at 2680, but this trend tells us, hey, we're going to bounce, but they're likely going to sell that at the first pass. So where is that first line of resistance? Looks like about 2695. If it collapses below there, then we've got ourselves short action that we can chase down. And you can use a 15-minute chart for that. All right, folks, that's it. Weekly updates the begin on Monday, always a little bit longer than the daily ones, but want to keep things in framework. Remember, the last thing, choose where you're going to execute before the candlesticks open on the day. That way you manage the risk, you understand the trend, and you can move forward. If you take trades like that and you manage your risk and you make 3 wrong trades in a row, it means that your anticipation of what you've been looking at needs to be recalibrated. So slip into that OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and then act, go slow. And that's going to make things go fast. All right, your portfolio balance will rise the more deliberate you are about your entries and exits. All right, take care, everyone. See you on the streams. Midday Moneyball report on the Benzinga Pro platform today. Afternoon lab, Trade with the Traders on Top Step TV. See you then.